Um, okay, for the past several weeks, we've discussed two very key elements of our lives and our civilization, as well, as our society. The nature of Jesus and the nature or the reality of the Bible. Now, I want to move on from that, and I want to build on the information that I've shared with you, but it's necessary to regroup for a few moments and see where we've been with this and what we've found. So, we can kind of determine what is important about this. And I think if I can tie the pieces together properly, you'll find that it is extremely important. My premise with you has been that there is no such thing as spirit. That spirit is an English word. I've also provided to you a premise that Jesus never did live as a physical person, but rather is a supreme light being or photon in the invisible quantum realm. And I've also proposed that the Bible is a book of Greek mythology containing information about that very same subatomic quantum realm. And the only thing that I've used, and the only thing I can use to support in any way this premise is history and science. So let's just regroup for a moment and see if you're comfortable with these things and where I've gotten them from. Where was the Bible written? Real quickly. Now, first let's deal with the Old Testament. Now, in order to make Christian people comfortable with this, I chose a Christian Bible study website. This information is known to every historian, but there are many religious people that are not comfortable with this or do not know this, and so I chose this Bible study website, Christian Bible study website. And I want to provide you the information from them as to where the Bible, the Old Testament, was written. That's www.keyway.ca/htm, Daily Bible Study. Where was the Old Testament written? The Bible. Alexandria, that's Alexandria, Egypt, became one of the greatest ancient centers of knowledge and trade. A great library was founded there. Many Jews also lived in the city and adopted Greek ways and language. The Septuagint, the Old Testament translation into Greek, was made by Jewish scholars in Alexandria. Okay. Oops, you went a little too quick there. The Septuagint is the Old Testament in Greek. That's the Old Testament that we use in the West, okay? The Jewish scholars were called Hellenists. They came to Alexandria when Alexander the Great conquered that area and turned it into the center of Zeus worship and so forth, and they gave up their heritage as far as Jews are concerned and adopted the Greek heritage. And anyhow, that pretty much concludes that, and history says the same thing. The Old Testament was written by Greeks in Alexandria, Egypt. Okay? Now, the New Testament. The New Testament has a bit more controversy, but this is what history tells us about the New Testament, which has Jesus and Peter, Paul, and Mary, and all these people. All right. Most textual Peter, Paul, and Mary, it's true, isn't it? Can you see them there on out front of the manger? This land is your land. Most textual critics of the New Testament favor the Alexandrian text type as the closest representative of the autographs for many reasons. So it's saying that critics, historical critics, trying to find out where all of these ancient writings come, have centered on saying it came from Alexandria, the same place where the Old Testament came from, the center of Zeus worship. One reason is that Alexandrian manuscripts are the oldest we have found. And some of the earliest church fathers used readings found in the Alexandrian text. Another is that the Alexandrian readings are adjudged more often to be the ones that can best explain the origin of all the variant readings found in the other text types. So here's history, and here are critical people who study these things, neutral people. They don't have any axe to grind one way or the other. And they say that the New Testament was written in the city of Alexandria, the center of Zeus worship, the temple of Amun, and the center of Greek and Egyptian mythology. Now, who objected to this conclusion that history reached? In the United States, some critics have a dissenting view that prefers the Byzantine text type. They assert that Egypt almost alone offers optimal climatic conditions favoring preservation of ancient manuscripts. I never understood that because Alexandria is in Egypt. Some of those arguing in favor of Byzantine priority further assert that the Alexandrian church was dominated by the Gnostics, who generally had either docetic views of Jesus. A docetic view means that something is an apparition, a phantom, some kind of an invisible thing, not a real flesh and blood thing. Or generally considered his life to be just an allegory that was not based on facts. So, history says yes, it was in Alexandria. So the Christian people here objected. See, they never wanted anybody to think that the stories of Jesus and all of this stuff were written by people who were mythologists, who were worshiping Zeus, who were stoned, because these people in Alexandria weekly went down to the Eleusinian mysteries and got stoned. They took psychedelics. But they can't argue with the historical evidence. And you know one of the funny things? They're upset because they feel that the writings that came out of Alexandria suggested the Bible is allegory, and they say it's literal. But let's take a look real quick. Here's the Old Testament, and here's Paul of the Old Testament, and what does he say? He says, Galatians 4:22, it's written that Abraham had two sons, one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman, but he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh. He who was born of the free woman was by promise, which things are an allegory. That's still in the Bible. So if they say that it was written by people who believed all this was allegory, well, here it is. In the Bible, it says it's an allegory. No, Abraham having an affair with his maid and then having sex with his wife and having kids. It's never happened. Remember that woman was supposed to be 94 years old, had a kid or something like that? So that never happened. And the statement there certainly supports the premise that the Bible is mythology. It's in the Bible. You look at Galatians 4:22, and it says that the story of Abraham and Sarah is allegory. That means it never happened. It's a symbolic thing. So there we have three things. Old Testament, New Testament, allegory, and all of this stuff is pointing to Alexandria, Egypt. That's where it was written, Old and New Testament. And you see, the problem is once you prove this to yourself and you can accept this, then you can't take it literally anymore, because they didn't write anything literal in Alexandria, Egypt at that time. The next point was showing you evidence that is extremely credible that the stuff written in the Bible never happened. And the strongest piece of evidence that I ever was able to come up with is documentation by Professor Zeev Herzog of Tel Aviv University in Israel. I mean, what stronger evidence could we get about the scriptures than coming out of, quote, the Holy Land, which is about as holy as the inside of a machine gun, but nonetheless, the Holy Land. Okay. Now look what Zev Herzog says. This is Zev. The many Egyptian documents known to us do not make any reference to the sojourn of the children of Israel in Egypt or the events of the Exodus. There's no record of it. Generations of scholars tried to locate Mount Sinai and the stations of the tribes of Israel in the desert. Despite all this diligent research, not one site was identified that could correspond to the biblical picture. Professor Herzog of Tel Aviv University, an Israeli archaeologist, is drawing fire for claiming that the biblical history of the Jewish people is probably fiction. It never happened. Okay? Now, let's go on and see what else he says. Zev Herzog of Tel Aviv University argued that the exodus of the Hebrews from Egypt probably never happened, the Ten Commandments were not given on Mount Sinai, and Joshua never conquered the land of Israel. Herzog says if there was any King David, he was probably nothing more than a tribal chieftain, the same for Solomon. And he says there is no evidence that Joshua led the children of Israel into the Holy Land or brought down the walls of Jericho. Repeated excavations of various expeditions have only yielded disappointments. During the period when conquest would have taken place, there were no cities there, and of course, no walls to bring down. Now, I mean, this takes a lot of courage in the middle of Israel to say that, but he did, because he's a scientist, he's a professor, he's an archaeologist. He's not trying to fool anybody. He's just telling this is the way it is. There's no evidence of it. You don't think that if somebody opened the ocean and ran across to the other side, somebody wouldn't have written that down somewhere? So our historical evidence shows us that both the Old Testament and the New Testament were written in Alexandria, Egypt, the center of Zeus worship, as well as the center of Greek and Egyptian mythology, the home of the temple of Amun and the Eleusinian mysteries. So then after we've come up with that, we find from Professor Herzog and the archaeologist at the University of Tel Aviv that nothing we've read ever happened. It didn't. So the next question would be, if it didn't happen, what does it all mean? Why did they write all of that stuff? For what purpose? And before we get into that, let's once more look at Alexandria, Egypt. Now that we know this is where the Old and New Testament were written. Alexandria in 332 BC, Alexander of Macedon conquered Egypt with little resistance from the Persians. He was welcomed by the Egyptians as a deliverer. He visited Memphis and went on pilgrimage to the oracle of Amun at the oasis of Siwa. This is one of the reasons why you see in the Bible that Jesus is called the Amen, because Amun and Amen are the same. Okay? I mean, it's a wild thing, but every time the Christians or anybody in the church says amen, they're giving homage to the Egyptian sun god, because that's who he was. The oracle declared Alexander to be the son of Ammon. He conciliated the Egyptians by the respect which he showed for their religion, but he appointed Greeks to virtually all the senior posts in the country and founded a new Greek city, Alexandria, to be the new capital. The wealth of Egypt could now be harnessed for Alexander's conquest of the rest of the Persian Empire. Early in 331 BC, he was ready to depart. He led his forces away to Phoenicia. He left Cleomenes as the ruling monarch to control Egypt in his absence, and he never returned to Egypt. So basically that was it. Alexandria and the people he put in charge were Zeus worshippers. They worshipped at the temple of Amun. Okay? They were part of the Eleusinian mysteries. And they brought all of that, which was classic Greek knowledge, not only in mythological ways about the universe, but also science, of which, in some strange way, these people we call the classic Greeks had knowledge that was far beyond their time. Now, the people who wrote the Bible were Hellenists, which means many of them came from Palestine to Alexandria to study under the Greeks and to adopt the Greek ways and the Greek culture and the Greek ways of writing. Now, they would then be exposed to the scientific writings of the great minds of unknown origin. And I say great minds of unknown origin because where'd these people come from? How could people, hundreds of years before the Bible was written, maybe 1,000, you've got people hanging around the same neighborhood, and they knew about the speed of light, they knew about quantum physics, they knew about anatomy, they knew astronomy, they set the foundation for the Western culture and of science. I mean, how could this be? But these were people whose knowledge, whose scientific knowledge, found its way into the very scriptures that we read. Let me show you. There was Democritus. There was Aristotle. And there was Socrates. Now, just hold until I say. There was Plato. Okay. There was Pythagoras. And you know what? Tonight we have very, very special guests. All the way. When I saw this, I said, must be him. Hippocrates. Would you come up? Come up here. Take a close-up of this. Come up here.
Okay.
Take a close-up of that. Here he is in person.
Did you want me to go ahead?
No. No. There's a close. Here he is in person. You got a close-up of him? Hippo, you did a heck of a job back there. You can't. Is this him or not? Well, I said, that's Mike. Hippocrates, you know, what he was famous for was making barbecue sauce. Mike has a business. I should give you, what's the name of your business?
River City Sauce Company.
River City Sauce Company. When I saw that picture, I said, that's him.
In my spare time, I learned numerology from that.
That must have been one. You know, but you know, it's a funny thing. Because we are all, and we'll get into this, and we have people in parallel universes, and we all go on and on and on. Wouldn't it be funny if it really was? It could be. Like he said, he learned numerology from Pythagoras, his friend here. I don't think we have anybody here that looks like Pythagoras, but it could be.
Osama.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's interesting, but I thought you'd get a kick out of that. Doesn't it look just like him? Oh, jeez. But anyhow, these are the people whose knowledge and scientific knowledge led to the writing of the Bible because they put into the heads of the writers scientific truths to be revealed through mythological writings that showed up in the Bible. You know, I guess if there was one of these people, if that's what they were, I don't even know if they were people, but struck me the most, it was the one who talked of quantum physics thousands of years ago. I mean, he knew of the subatomic realm and what went on in a strange way. If you go into, you know, a bookstore today, you can pick up a book on quantum physics. You can see his name back in the index, and here he is, and his name is Zeno. I tell you, you know, he would say, you know, when you shoot an arrow, it really doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't move. And, you know, that's crazy. But he says, it's time that moves. And the arrow is there as time moves. And, you know, if you take a picture with a high-speed camera today, you can catch the arrow in flight. And it's right there, stopped. I mean, you know, here's a guy that talked, you know, 3,000 years ago, and we couldn't understand what the heck he was talking about. He's talking science. And so, what he did, he was born in 448 BC. You know, it always amazes me that we will look out to some, you know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and we don't even know if they existed or what the heck they were. And this is where all of our information comes from. Guys like this that really had God knowledge, we don't even know who they are. And he was born 448 years before the Jesus story. So, what was ever written about Zeno was not written by him. It was written by Aristotle in a book called Physics, Book 6, Chapter 9. Let me just show you a little bit about this guy. I think it's just so fascinating. Zeno's paradoxes are a set of problems devised by Zeno of Elea to support Parmenides' doctrine that all is one. That's where he's coming from. And that contrary to the evidence of our senses, the belief in plurality and change is mistaken, and in particular, motion is nothing but an illusion. I mean, who told this guy that? How is it possible he could even be thinking of such things? 448 BC. Go ahead. Zeno's paradoxes have puzzled, challenged, influenced, inspired, infuriated, and amused philosophers, mathematicians, physicists, and schoolchildren for over 2 millennia. The most famous are the so-called arguments against motion described by Aristotle in his books, Physics. So, you know, it's just, to me, we spend so much time in trying to find information about prophets and so forth from such a long time ago. And we never, you know, most of us never ever consider who gave knowledge of this type to these people. And I don't know how much I can impress on you that these were the people whose influence are found in the writing of the Bible. These are the people who in reality wrote the Bible. It's all mythology. It's all about the subatomic realm of existence that religion calls spirit. You know, mythology is so totally misunderstood because in the West we think, oh, that's a fairy tale, that's a lie, that's a myth, that it never doesn't mean anything. It's just a made-up story that never happened. Just a bunch of ignorant people talking about gods because they didn't know any better. And yet it came from a civilization that was the most advanced in the world by far, and provided the basis for Western civilization and science. Yes, there were myths, but the truths underlying those myths provided the basis for Western civilization and science. How could that be? So, we know who wrote the Bible. We know where it was written. And we know that mythology is part of it. And we should take a moment to try to understand what that is. And I'll take you to a website called Encyclopedia Mythica, which will give us a clearer understanding as to why the Bible is so important, if understood correctly, as a myth. And this information was written by somebody by the name of Bernard Doyle. And I tried to get a background on him with little success. I know he was a teacher of mythology, and I don't know where he came from or whatever, but anyhow, he's quoted an awful lot and when you get into discussions about mythology. And this is what he says. He says, broadly speaking, myths and mythology seek to rationalize and explain the universe and all that is in it. Wow. You see what I'm saying? If the Bible is mythology, then what it's doing is explaining the all, everything that is in it, including God and all the things that we call spiritual. That's what the myth does. Thus, they have a similar function to science, theology, religion, and history in modern societies. Systems of myths have provided a cosmological and historical framework for societies that have lacked the more sophisticated knowledge provided by modern science and historical investigation. Basically what that's saying is these things were written thousands of years ago, really. And obviously nobody could understand it. And so they had to sit and wait until the race evolved to a point of being able to understand. And we've reached that point where we can now understand the subatomic realm, electrons and photons and protons and atoms and all that stuff. But what that does, the fact that they wrote this thousands of years ago, and it winds up in a book called the Bible, would have to then lead us to say, wow, this is real. This has tremendous credibility. And who in the world told them about this stuff in such an ancient and backward civilization? Creation myths provide an explanation of the origin of the universe in all its complexity. They are an important part of most mythological systems. Creation myths often evoke primal gods and animals, titanic struggles between opposing forces, or the death and or dismemberment of these gods or animals as the means whereby the universe and its components were created. In other words, these titanic struggles between forces of gods or animals, these gigantic monsters, could be nothing more than a cold front colliding with a warm front and creating immense destruction in the form of a tornado. And this is the way it was laid down so that people, as they evolved, would begin to understand the nature of those who wrote the Bible, really. See? And it's the more you get into it, the more interesting it becomes, because what you have here is a cosmological framework concerning the universe given to a backward civilization. And as this civilization then evolved, these truths would be available. So you see why the Bible as mythology becomes so important. It's telling us the reality of the forces of the unseen world and what effect they have on our three-dimensional civilization. Well, creation myths are amongst mankind's earliest attempts to explain some of the most profound questions about the nature and origin of the universe. These are questions that we are still attempting to answer today. I mean, people will pick up and read the myth about the woman with snakes coming out of her head. Did you ever read that? What was her name? What was her? Medusa. And you say, there's no woman with snakes coming out of her head. But then on the other hand, sometimes we all have snakes slithering through our head. And that's what they're talking about. They're talking about the monsters that hiss within inside of us. And only when her head is cut off, only when we cut away into meditation and cut away from the thoughts, can what? Pegasus, the winged white horse, then come out of that neck which has been severed. And why is it important? Okay. Ready, real quick, because I don't want to veer off of this. Medusa's head snakes. Okay. They cut off her head, and Pegasus leaps out. Okay. That's very, very important to understand. Why? Because Pegasus is a white horse, okay, who is the son of the god of the sea, the ocean. Who's that? Poseidon. So then what is Pegasus? Pegasus is a white seahorse. Okay? Pegasus kicks the fountain at Hippocrene, and the water flows out to the at the fountain. He becomes sacred to the Muses and the goddess of memory. The Muses, there were 9 Muses. The word muse became the word museum because the goddess of memory. So we have a white seahorse important to memory. If you look, well, you can't look, but inside of your head is a structure called the hippocampus. The word hippocampus means seahorse. The color of it is white. And the hippocampus, the white seahorse inside of you, is responsible for memory. So you see? And what is it that is brought back? How does our memory, when we cut away from those thoughts, and the Pegasus arises within us, then we are brought back to the memory of our creation and our origins in the company of what we call God and the angels and all the good stuff. So that's why it's so important. See? That's why, and if you look at all of those myths, you see these underlying stories of the forces of nature. And they come right back in between your ears. And yet we not only do we not understand the nature of these stories, we don't even understand the nature of what a myth is. Let's take a look at a Chinese creation myth and see how it fits into our Bible creation myth. The first living thing was Panku. He evolved inside a gigantic cosmic egg, which contained all the elements of the universe totally intermixed together. Panku grew by about 10 feet each day. As he grew, he separated the earth from the sky within the egg. At the same time, he gradually separated the many opposites in nature, male and female, wet and dry, light and dark, yin and yang. These were all originally totally commingled in the egg. While he grew, he also created the first humans. After 18,000 years, the egg hatched and Panku died from the effort of creation. From his eyes, the sun and the moon appeared. From his sweat, rain and dew. From his voice, thunder, and from his body, all the natural features of the earth arose. So you see, that's a Chinese element of creation. And let's just look. And then it goes on and it says, the formless chaotic egg, which was the birthplace of Panku, is an example of the idea of a primitive chaos or featureless, undifferentiated universe. This is the most frequently found primordial stuff of the universe in creation myths. The Greeks referred to this initial formless state of the universe as chaos, and this is the origin of the term. So here we have this ancient Chinese myth bringing the creation out of this primitive chaos, And so then when we go into the Greek civilization, the Western civilization, and we look then here at Genesis, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And all of these things basically have the same root, and yet in that story, which is above the Chinese story, is written in a way of talking of a person, and yet it is referring to nature. It is referring to the very creation and the activity of the universe. You see, the book of Genesis is our creation myth. And people believe in our creation myth just as people believed in theirs. We always have a problem. Those people, they believe in all of that work gods and all of that stuff. Chinese, they believe in all that crazy stuff. We believe this. But, of course, that's our creation myth. Look at what it says here. Furthermore, in the context of this document, all myths are at some stage actually believed to be true by the peoples of the societies that used or originated the myth. And that's why you believe the Bible. That's why people say, I believe every word of it. Because we all believe our own mythologies. When we don't understand them, and we don't understand what they mean, then we simply look at the literal interpretation and believe that. You can laugh at people believing that, snakes are coming out of Medusa's head or Panku in the formless egg, but you go into any church and you'll ask people, and yes, they believe that God took a rib out of Adam and made Eve. Eve was made out of spare ribs. You go into that same church and you say, do you believe that Eve talked to a snake? And, oh yes, it says in the Bible. I believe every word. So they believe their own myth in the same way that Chinese would at that time believe their myth, or the Greeks believe their myth. We all have our own mythology, and we swear that it's true. And Greek mythology, taken literally, has brought us to the point where we have no knowledge whatsoever of that subatomic quantum realm that is reality. And we all fell for it. Look, here's our friends Adam and Eve, and luckily they just happened to have that picture taken where two branches are just in the right place. Shows you how God takes care of things. In contrast to a primordial universe consisting of some undifferentiated matter, there are some creation myths that describe a creation of the universe from nothing, or ex nihilo. A God who exists in a void performs some action which results in the universe coming into being, sometimes in an undifferentiated state. The Egyptian creation myth, as related in the pyramid text, is one example of creation from nothing. Atum is the first god who creates his brother and sister Shu and Tefnut. Atum, then, in the Greek myth, becomes Adam. atom. Come on, this is getting good. Atom. Go on to the next one. Genesis 2:21, and the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh, and the rib which the Lord God taken from man, he made a woman, and he brought her to the man. Adam. Normally atoms are neutral and have no charge. However, in order to gain stability, they will sacrifice their neutrality by either losing one or more of its outermost electrons, rib, thus becoming a positive ion, atom, or they will gain one or more electrons, thus becoming a negative ion, Eve. And once this has happened, then the resulting charged atoms will attract each other. That still goes on, doesn't it? That electrical attraction between two oppositely charged ions is referred to as an ionic bond. He took the rib, he took the electron out of atom, he put the electron into another atom, which was Eve, and we have an ionic bond, and they were attracted to one another, and so. Now, I would get in a lot of trouble by telling the story. You know why? Because it's true. Don't tell me that. Oh, no, I like the rib story. I like spare ribs. But when you look at that, and you look at the question of ionic bonding and atoms and electrons, instantly you should be able to see Aristotle and Democritus in this stuff. You have to. Because they're the only ones that knew about such stuff back then. And that is the premise here. The Bible confirmed thousands of years ago what some scientists are saying today. Namely, there are parallel universes, and there is intelligent life in those universes, and that mysterious quantum world is what religion has referred to as spirit. So instead of focusing on unknown prophets from ancient desert civilizations, why don't we focus on the current wisdom available through the wise people of today? And so let's think of spiritual things, the religious term. Where are they? Where are these spiritual things? I mean, where do we go after this life? Where do we go when we dream? Where are the God beings and things we call angels? Where the heck is all this stuff? Nobody has a clue, yet they've been going to church for 2,000 years. And they're still reading the same stories they read 2,000 years ago. And they're not 1 inch closer to understanding what it's about. If the Greeks who wrote the Bible were talking about the quantum world, the invisible subatomic world that we call spirit, where is it? What about it? How come? Can you go there? Now, it's a most exciting thing because science is now pointing us in the direction of where the entities that we have called God, spirits, and angels are. They're pointing us in the direction, as the Bible did, as to where those people who died and whom you loved are. You don't have to have faith anymore. You no longer have to talk in strange religious terms anymore. Terms that can't prove anything. But in reality, we can now point to the brilliant minds telling us about these magical places in terms that describe absolute reality. Now, why is it important that we understand the Bible to be this product of Greek mythology, written in the center of such mythology and connected to the brilliance of Aristotle, Pythagoras, Democritus, Empedocles, and so forth. Because in understanding that, you can understand the reality of things that we previously had to have some kind of religious faith even to imagine. Let me introduce you, for those of you who have not seen this before, the Einstein Emeritus Professor of Science, Paul Steinhardt, at Princeton University. Now, let's take what the Bible said. Let's take what the ancient Greek science was telling us about this invisible world, and now let's bring it to Princeton University to an Einstein Emeritus Professor, Paul Steinhardt. And there he is. For years, parallel universes were a staple of the Twilight Zone. Science fiction writers loved to speculate on the possible other universes which might exist. In one, they said Elvis Presley might still be alive. Or in another, the British Empire might still be going strong. And this is Professor Steinhardt's conclusion. Serious scientists dismiss all the speculation as absurd. But now it seems the speculation wasn't absurd enough. Parallel universes really do exist, and they are much stranger than even the science fiction writers dared to imagine. What does he know? And you know the strange part? Who the heck can he tell? You can't tell people. Huh? He's got all the degrees, he's got all of this knowledge and everything, and all he can do is talk to other scientists. There's a brilliant scientific mind telling us that the world we always thought of as a place of spirits and angels and heaven does exist. It really does. It's a parallel world. And he says it's much stranger than any science fiction writer could dare to imagine. I would love to sit down with him and say, what did you mean by that? That is where you were hoping to go. That is where you flood churches every week and praying for something. And he's telling you, yes, it's true. It's a real place. Here's Professor Max Tegmark of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. There are infinitely many other inhabited planets, including not just one, but infinitely many, that have people with the same appearance, names, and memories as you, who play out every possible permutation, that means combination of options, of your life's choices. Now, if you think this is some new age cracky stuff, call a guy up. Tell him how smart you are. Isn't that amazing? People with the same appearance, look just like you, the same name that you have, same memories that you have. But you know the interesting part as you get into it? You find out that if you decide to come here, the you someplace else will decide to go to the movies. It'll always be opposite. Not only do these places exist, but you are already living in them. Professor David Deutsch, Oxford University in England. Our twins in parallel universes are just as real as we are, says David. The notion that our world is somehow more real is derived not from experience, since each world seems equally real to its inhabitants, nor from quantum mechanics. Now listen to this, and you think who you're in touch with when you sleep, when you dream, when you think. In an absolute sense, there are no splits at all, and no moment when your unseen counterparts can no longer affect you. Boy, all of a sudden I had this idea. From who? Our twins in parallel universes are just as real as we are. And there is no moment when your other unseen self can no longer affect you. Eminent physicist Fred Alan Wolf. There's Fred, happy guy. At the annual meeting of the Association for the Study of Dreams held in Washington, physicist Fred Alan Wolf delivered a talk in which he asserted that the holographic model explains lucid dreams. Now watch this one. Wolf believes such dreams are actually visits to parallel realities, and the holographic model will ultimately allow us to develop a physics of consciousness which will enable us to begin to explore more fully these other dimensional levels of existence. You're not going to bed tonight, you're going out. Your body is going to lay there, but you're gone. You're off to see the wizard. You're off in what you think is a dream, but is a real experience in a parallel reality. I find it amazing that we go to church to make sure we go somewhere when we die, and every night we go to sleep, we go there anyhow. Look at this. Recent discoveries in quantum physics, the study of the physics of subatomic particles, and in cosmology, the branch of astronomy and astrophysics that deals with the universe taken as a whole, shed new light on how mind interacts with matter. These discoveries compel acceptance of the idea that there is far more than just one universe, and that we constantly interact with many of these hidden universes. And you know why you have trouble believing it? Because you go to church. And they tell you, oh, don't go near that guy. Oh, stay away. He's a nut and all this stuff. I didn't bring you crazy people. I'm bringing you eminent scientists from all over the world to tell you this stuff. We constantly are interacting with hidden universes. And the only thing that keeps you from flying into all of them is your body. But what happens to your body when you sleep? A lot of you never knew what happens. How come you can go into these universes when you sleep and not when you're awake? Watch. Brain disconnects during deep sleep. University of Wisconsin study says, in Madison, Wisconsin, as we slip into deep sleep, higher regions of our brains take a vacation from each other, disconnecting so much that consciousness is snuffed out and a once highly integrated organ becomes separated, according to a groundbreaking experiment by University of Wisconsin-Madison researchers. When you go to sleep, your brain disconnects from your body. You know why? Because, if you were all connected, you'd be running around doing all this stuff. I'm sure there are some times when things short out and you hear people sleepwalking or whatever, they're running around doing all kinds of stuff. But your brain separates from your body. When that happens, you're free to go. And you do. So tonight, you're going to lay down, your body's going to go to sleep, your brain's going to disconnect from your body, and off you go. And the next thing you know, you're going to be running around doing some stuff. Now here's Fred Alan Wolf again, with an explanation of the subatomic quantum world, of which the Bible writes to the scientific minds of classic Greeks in mythology. What is the parallel universe? Like an everyday universe, it is a region of space and time containing matter, galaxies, stars, planets, and living beings. In other words, a parallel universe is similar and possibly even a duplicate of our own universe. Not only in a parallel universe must there be other human beings, but these may be human beings who are exact duplicates of ourselves and who are connected to ourselves through mechanisms only explainable using quantum physics concepts. Connected to ourselves. But where is this? How is this connected to us? Where the heck do we find this stuff? This is what else. The laboratory of parallel universe experimentation may not lie in the mechanical time machine, but could exist between our ears, in the temple. If the parallel universe of relativity are the same as those of quantum theory, the possibility exists that parallel universes may be extremely close to us, perhaps only atomic dimensions away, but perhaps in a higher dimension of space, an extension in what physicists call superspace, between our ears, in your head. What does it say? Modern neuroscience, through the study of altered states of awareness, schizophrenia, and lucid dreaming, could be indications of the closeness of parallel worlds to our own. Maybe you can see the connection between what the scientists of Alexandria, Egypt, who wrote the Bible under Greek understanding, and the scientists of today like Fred Alan. If I showed it to you this way, take a look at this way and see if it makes it easier to understand. Fred Alan Wolf, the laboratory of parallel universe experimentation may not lie in a mechanical time machine, but could exist between our ears. You know this fellow? This is Jesus. The kingdom of God is within you. Same thing. You say, how could all this be? Because these are quantum impulses of a subatomic reality that exists around and inside of us. And that's what Fred is saying. It's between our ears. That's what Jesus is saying. It's within you. Okay? We are connected to ourselves in other strange but real places. And that is the world of what we call spirits and angels and so on. That is the world the Bible is talking about. You see, somebody in that Greek culture wrote these words. All of this universe, this subatomic power of this universe is inside of you, just like Fred says. That is why it had to be written through the minds of the classic Greeks who were sent here to show us in symbol, awaiting the time which has come now when we can understand this. Now, I feel strongly, very strongly, that the people we call classic Greeks, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Hippocrates, Pythagoras, Democritus, Zeno, Empedocles, Did you ever hear of Diogenes? Diogenes was probably the most famous, brilliant philosopher ever. You ought to read his stuff. But you know what he did? He'd wander around the streets like a bum. And yet people would come to him and ask him. Aristotle would come to him and ask him. And you know what Diogenes? Diogenes would go to the bathroom in the street. And people would say, how could such a brilliant person do that? I mean, and you know what he would say? Well, the dogs are nicer than you, and they do that. They don't have any problem with that. And they're wonderful. And he was always surrounded with dogs and walking down the street, and he'd go to the bathroom on the streets, just like the dogs. No problem. Read some of his stuff. So go on the internet sometime, right? Diogene, Diogenes. But these things were dispatched from the quantum realm to provide us in the physical realm with understanding. Now, I'm going to conclude by reminding you of one brilliant mind of our time who really solidly proved this. You know, there was a lot of theories and so forth. But everybody got questioned, and a lot of people didn't know what to say. There was one guy came along, and he unfortunately died. One guy came along, and he proved all of this stuff. He proved that if this is one side of the universe, and this is the other side of the universe, that if you touch this, and even though the other one's not connected, it's going to affect it. See? If you push this one way, that's going to go another way. And it could be trillions of light years away. And he proved it. His name was John Stuart Bell. And his thing was called Bell's theorem. What's interesting, as I said, he unfortunately, I don't know where we are. Oh, this is Jesus, but let's go on. Just hit it. I forgot this was there. Okay, Jesus. Okay, Irish physicist John Stuart Bell considered the EPR system and showed with a devilishly clever proof that all conceivable models of reality must incorporate this instant connection. What Bell showed is that despite the fact that relativity prohibits instantaneous connections, and despite the fact that no such connections have ever been observed either in EPR experiments or any other, despite the fact that quantum theory itself predicts no observable instant connections, despite all of these considerations from fact and theory, the reality of EPR particles is such that their initial contact must create an instantaneous voodoo-style link between them. You something and it's going to affect something else. And he proved it. And nobody has been ever able to question it. The voodoo link. Let's go back to the one you were. Jesus said the first thing you got to look for is the kingdom of God. The quantum world. Because why? Where did he say you look? He said it's within you. How do I do that? Take no thought. Separate from the thoughts of the mind. Is that all? If your eye be single, your whole body will fill with light. You know what's going to happen? When you stimulate the pineal gland of the brain, it secretes DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which is an illegal drug. And you'll go and you'll see all of this stuff. And then he wound up by saying in Luke 11, you've taken away the key of knowledge because you didn't enter within yourself. And other people that were entering in, you hindered the way they do today when they tell people, oh, don't do that. You'll open your mind to the devil. Jesus told you about it through the classic Greek scientists and the scientists of today like Steinhardt and Tegmark and Deitch and Wolf have confirmed it for you. It's within you. It's available to you. You don't have to have faith. You don't have to worry about believing it. You just have to do it. Thank you, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.